God bless you, my brothers and sisters, and welcome again to Lessons from the Cutting Room Floor. It's hard to believe that we are into almost the last week in the month of January in the year of 2022. Time seems to fly by. Seems like just yesterday we were planning on our Christmas celebrations and getting ready for New Year's and looking at how we would do those things. And now here we are, thinking about the Super Bowl coming up in just a couple of weeks, moving into African American History Month in just 1 week. God is doing some amazing things, and He's keeping us going. He's keeping us alive and keeping us strong. This coming Saturday, brothers, don't you forget, I'm meeting with all of you on Saturday at 9 o'clock. Bring your breakfast. Somebody said, well, where are we meeting? Online. Just go to newpsalmist.churchcenter.com and register, newpsalmist.churchcenter.com. Go to events and click on that you'll be at the breakfast, and we'll send you the link so you can be a part of our men's breakfast. It's going to be exciting, and I think we're going to start the year, and I want you to be on hand to be with us as we start the year and get into what God would have us to learn on this coming Saturday. Now, African American History Month is coming up right around the corner. And we're going to start by giving out questions. Every Sunday, you're going to see a question on the screen. And I'd like you to take a look at that question, and you and your friends or you and your family, set aside some time during the week. You and your discipleship group, set aside some time during the week. You and your broader family, your mother, your father, your brothers, your sisters, and especially those of you with children, set aside some time of the week to discuss that question, Carry it on the job. Carry it to your various fraternity and sorority meetings. Talk about it along the way with some of your good friends. Ask them the question. Then by Thursday of that week, send us a synopsis of what you all said about that question. Doesn't have to be long, maybe a paragraph. And what we're going to be doing is posting them in the magazine, and some of them we'll post on the next Sunday's before and after slides, before and after service. But I want every family wrestling with these issues. There'll be one question a week. Sometimes it'll be to investigate something, to think about something, to get to understand some historical figure in our African American experience. But we want to use this time wisely. We're going to have a book list for you to read from, all the way down to children, books that you can read that we think will really be a blessing to you in this season and give you some more information about our experience as a people and where we are right now. So keep in mind all of that's going to be happening every Sunday. I'm asking for whether you're in our physical campus or our virtual campuses. We're dressing up. Somebody say, dressing up. Yes, we're getting out of bed. We're dressing up, putting on our African attire, and we're wearing our African attire for the day. We're wearing it every Sunday of the month. We are reasserting to ourselves who we are, where our heritage is. Somebody might ask, well, I don't have so much. Wear what you have. Wear what you have. Wear what defines for you our African heritage. We may even post some recipes of things that you can cook throughout the season that will really reflect more about our tradition. So keep all of this in mind. Look for everything that's coming out. Look for all we'll be doing through the month. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be a great time. Well, today we're studying lessons from the cutting room floor, getting ready to end the month of January. And throughout this month, I've been trying to preach sermons to get us started. Let us go back to church. Things when the saints go to worship. And now this message, stepping into your new role. Stepping into your new role. And Sunday's message, I feel the Spirit. All of these are ideas, tenets, postures, positions, realizations, I think are necessary for us as we get ready to pilgrimage through 2022. Fully cognizant that we are unaware of what will happen from one day to the next. All we know is that God is going to move in a mighty way. God is going to be doing things. God is going to be working with us in a mighty, mighty way. There'll be hills and there'll be valleys. That's why we open the year with when the saints go to worship. There'll be hills, there'll be valleys. There'll be things we have to go through when the saints go to worship. Let us go back to church. There'll be things we have to deal with, new assignments we have to take on, stepping into your new role. And how do I handle it? By being filled with the Spirit. So I want you to take these 4 messages and I want you to wrap your mind around them. Go back and listen to them over and over. Worship with the Word. Worship with the Word. And what I would invite you to do in Bible study in our class every week is what you don't get on Thursday night, go back and chunk it. Listen to a part of it again tomorrow. Listen to a part of it Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Keep listening until this word makes sense to you. Till this word makes sense to you. So let's jump in. Father, in the name of Jesus, bless us now as we seek to study your word, as we seek to dig in deeper. Let your word come alive in our lives, and we will give you not some praise, but all the praise. In Jesus' name, amen. We're in the book of Esther. The text really starts in chapter 4, but I want to give you some history, some of the things that were left on the cutting room floor. And in order to do that, I need you to drop back to chapter 1. Go back to chapter 1. So much is included in the context, because in order to understand what God is doing at any particular moment, whenever something is striking in your life, whenever some incident rises, that incident creates tension. And that tension is between the character, between the setting, and between what's going on in that moment, what that moment is calling for. And so what we want to look at tonight are these tensions. But in order to understand this tension of stepping into a new role, we have to understand the context in which this moment arises. This incident comes on the radar in chapter 4. In chapter 4. The children of Israel have been given reprieve. Remember back in the book of Isaiah prophesied that they were going to be carried into captivity. Jeremiah prophesied they'd be carried into captivity. And during the time of Jeremiah's prophecy, they were captured. Judah was captured by the Babylonian Empire. Nebuchadnezzar and his armies tore down their gates and burned their gates and tore down their walls, emptied out the temple of God, and carried their possessions and people back to Babylon. For 70 years, they lived in Babylon. 70 years, the Babylonian Empire seemed to reign supreme. It seemed to be the force around the world. We studied about, not in Bible class, but in schools, we studied about the 7 wonders of the world. And one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world were the hanging gardens of Babylon. Babylon was a marvelous place, but the children of Israel were slaves there. They hung their harps on the willows when the Babylonians demanded of them a song. And their response was, how can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? They were slaves in the land of Babylon. It is here in Babylon that Genesis 1 is really concretized from a verbal tradition to a written tradition. A written tradition that shows that the God who is the God of all people, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is God. And he is not capricious. He did not make man evil, but he made man good, breathed into him the breath of God, and man became a living soul. And so the Jews have, in Babylon, understood who they are in God. And understood that God, unlike the gods of Babylon, or later the gods of the Greeks or the gods of the Romans, their God is not capricious. Their God is not one who acts on a whim, who cares little about people and only uses them for his plan. Our God loves his people. God created them out of the dust, blew into their nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. And God chose the people of Israel, the sons of Abraham, to be his people. That's their concept. That's their concept. So for 70 years, they are living in Babylon until a new king comes on the throne. He is King Cyrus. Cyrus and the Median armies, he has defeated all of the foes, and he has really taken charge of the Babylonian kingdom. Cyrus has defeated all of the other nations, the Medes, the Neo-Babylonians. He has defeated them all. And now the Persian Empire, the Achaemenid Empire, is beginning to rise. Babylon replaced Assyria. We read about them in Isaiah. In Isaiah, the battle with the Assyrians, chapter 39 in particular. Isaiah and Jeremiah deal with the Babylonians. The Assyrians capture Samaria and Israel and carry them captive. And they intermingle with folk. They intermarry. That's why the Samaritans and the Jews have no fellowship. Because when the Assyrians captured them, their policy was to have folk intermarry and to populate the land with this mixed breed of people. When the Babylonians captured the people of Judah, they marched them off to Babylonia, carried them there, left some there, but they did not resettle other nations in that land. They marched them to Babylon. Now the Babylonians have been defeated by the Persian Median Empire, the Persians and the Medes. And Cyrus is the king of the Persians. Cyrus gives an order that the Jews can return to their homeland. Isaiah, if you pick him up around chapter 40, he starts talking about we can now go home. And Cyrus is considered to be almost the anointed one. He is considered to be an agent of God. Even though he's a Persian, even though he is a part of the oppressive force, he is being used by God. In other words, God can use whosoever he desires. He can use whomsoever he desires to accomplish whatever is his will. And they will be his servant even if they don't recognize it. They're accomplishing higher purposes. Does it mean that they will always accomplish higher purposes? No. But it means there are higher purposes that God is working through them. Higher purposes he is working through them. And there are other things that they're doing that may be just as detrimental in other ways. So many of the Jews packed up and left. That's why Isaiah writes in chapter 40 that every mountain shall be brought low, every valley shall be exalted. Crooked ways shall be made straight, and the rough places shall be made plain, and all flesh shall see it together. He starts it off, behold, the voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare ye the way of our Lord, because the children of Israel are going back home. All of these next chapters after chapter 40 talk about this great return. He will enlarge our tent. This is the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes. So the Jews marched back to Jerusalem. Somebody said, well, wait a minute. If the Jews went back to Jerusalem, how's this story here? Because all the Jews did not return. Some found it desirable, for whatever reason, to stay in Babylon, to stay in the land of Susa, to stay in the places they had inhabited. Remember Nehemiah? When Nehemiah is the cupbearer of the king, he is not the cupbearer for the king of Judah. He is the cupbearer for the king of Persia. And he is allowed, he hears the report of what has happened when the children of Israel return home, and he then goes and asks for permission to return home. Same thing with Ezra, permission to go back home to help rebuild the city. But all the Jews did not go. And so that brings us in to the book of Esther, because all the Jews have not gone back to Jerusalem. Now, the big question, there's a question among biblical historians as to the actuality, the actual event of Queen Esther and this story. What is known is that there was a period when the Persians were about to kill all the Jews, and they were miraculously saved. And so some have said that the story is an attempt to give explanation for the sacred holiday of Purim, Purim, when the Jews celebrate the deliverance from the near threat of extinction. Remember, they were to be extinguished throughout the realm. So that would have been their end. And so we have the story of Esther. It starts off, this is what happened during the time of Xerxes. The Xerxes, who ruled 120 provinces stretching from India to Africa, to Cush. At that time, King Xerxes reigned from his royal throne in the citadel of Susa. And in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a banquet. Now, this is a lot crunched in one little verse, because it says this is what happened during the time of Xerxes, who reigned or ruled over 127 provinces. Let me see if I can encapsulate this. Cyrus had a son, and his son, the way all of this breaks out is that when Cyrus was in charge, Cyrus sent them back home. The firstborn son, Darius, or Darius, however you would pronounce it. The firstborn son is Darius, who comes to the throne. And after he comes to the throne, Darius has a son who is Xerxes, in some cases known as Xerxes I. But Xerxes is an interesting name. It is a, It is a combination. It is a way of trying to put together from a variety of languages who this man really is, who Xerxes is, how he functions, how he presents himself. But Xerxes, the more appropriate name we might say, is Ahasuerus. And when you work Ahasuerus all the way through the transliterations and the whatever, from the Hebrew to the Greek to the Latin and whatever, you would come up with Xerxes. But his formal name is Ahasuerus. 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 I should have somebody say, right? Somebody say Ahasuerus, Ashaurus. Ahasuerus. He is the leader he is the Xerxes I. He is Xerxes I. Darius increases the empire of Cyrus. And Cyrus never defeated the Egyptians. Darius defeats the Egyptians. And the empire begins to grow, or rather Darius never did, but Xerxes, Ahasuerus, defeats the Egyptians. And it's around the 3rd year of his reign, which would correspond to this great banquet that he is holding. Because as I say, church historic and biblical historians wrestle with, who is this Ahasuerus? Who is this Xerxes? When did all of this happen? Because they don't seem to find the exact evidence that they're looking for to kind of give some kind of concreteness to this moment in history. Especially since they find that Ahasuerus' wife is named something else, and so it gets a little problematic for them. And so some biblical scholars say this story is put here to give explanation for the holiday, Purim. But whatever way you come to the story still gives us significant information about God and his relationship to his people and how we step into different roles. Ahasuerus has a major banquet. At the time, Ahasuerus calls for a banquet. He gave a banquet for all his nobles and officials, the military leaders of Persia and Media. The princes and the nobles of the provinces were all present. And it's almost a 6-month festival. And he's displaying all of his wealth, all that he's captured from all the places. He's gotten so much. I mean, he's serving wine, he's serving food. It is a carnival atmosphere, a 6-month celebration of good times. And Queen Vashti, his wife, gives a similar event, a banquet, for the women in the royal palace of Xerxes. So now all the women are over here, all the men are over here, and it is a full-fledged party. I mean, everything is laid out. It lets you know the wealth that the king has and the opulence with which they live. On verse 10, on the seventh day, when King Xerxes was in high spirits from wine. I love how the Bible says it. If we were in the street, we'd say it one of two ways. He was high or he was drunk. He commanded the 7 eunuchs who served him, you see their names, to bring before him Queen Vashti, wearing her royal crown, in order to display her beauty to the people and nobles, for she was lovely to look at. He said, go get my wife. Tell her come over here. I want her come show how pretty she is. I want everybody to see my wife. He high, he drunk, he's fumbling around. Go get her, bring her over here. Tell her to come over here where I am. But when the attendants delivered the king's command, Vashti refused to come. Now, I don't know what got into her. Somebody said, well, she just didn't want to be that way. She was independent. This was the world in which she lived. Now, I can venture to think and surmise, maybe this wasn't the first time this had happened to her. And maybe this was the last time she was going to take it. Maybe this was the last time, not only the embarrassment of being paraded like a dog in a show, or a horse in at a rodeo. She decided, I'm not going to endure this anymore. Maybe it was physical abuse attached with it. But maybe she had had enough. And the question comes, what do you do when you've had enough? And this text just reeks, because it is the same confrontation that Esther is going to face a little later. What are you willing to put what you have on the line? Is there some principle by which you live, some mandate that is given to you, some sense of self that you have that will make you or cause you to put the things that are valuable in somebody's context on the line? Does your sanity outweigh the house you live in? Does your sense of well-being mean you stay with someone who does not mean you well? Does your feeling of integrity allow you to stay where folk are disingenuous, even though there are certain perks to being in an improper place. Vashti says, I've had enough. Now, we don't read anymore about what happens to her after, except she's banished from the kingdom. I didn't get to preach that part Sunday. She's banished. She's put out and she's whatever. She loses all of that. But what are you willing to lose to keep what you have to keep? Is there anything about you that has to be maintained, that is beyond, that what you're being asked to pay is too high a price? You cannot pay this price. You cannot put this on the back shelf. You cannot do this. She says, I cannot put myself in this position one more time. I remember early on in my working career, I was in high school, and I was an honor student in high school, and I thought I'd be able to get a good job. I had, somebody might say, been sheltered from some of the realities of being black. Even though I grew up in a black reality, I guess when you're in the pot, you don't realize what else is in there with you or what's outside of it. But I remember going to apply at one of the downtown stores. I was an honor student going to one of the best schools in the city. I just knew I'd get a good job, and I knew a job I wanted. I wanted to work on the floor. I wanted to be a salesman. I wanted to learn how to sell. I could see that as a long-term trajectory in business. I wanted to be able to do that. Went through all the hiring and everything, and I'm working for it. And the job they offered me was in the kitchen. In the kitchen of one of the big restaurants of the hotel. And one of the jobs they offered me in the kitchen of one of the big hotels, not big hotels, big department stores that sold all the stuff I wanted to sell. And I wanted to save my money to be able, when I went back to school that next semester, to have a tennis sweater. Some of y'all remember them from back in the day, to buy a tennis sweater, to be able to buy a tennis sweater. And I got a job in the kitchen, that's what they offered me, washing the pots and pans that accumulated from the chefs and the salad bars and all the things that were associated with this major dining room. And periodically, we'd have to scrape the grease off the floor. Now I was a little kid, I think I was 17. Yeah, I was going into my senior year, so this is my junior year in high school. I was 16. I was 16 going into my senior year. I just gotten my work permit. I could now work. I'm going into the National Honor Society at Baltimore Polytechnic Institute. I am excited working that summer year. And the job I get is to work in the kitchen. It had its pluses. I got to eat some stuff here and there. I got to work in the other kitchens like the bakery. I guess that's why to this day I still love sweets and eat everything that ain't nailed down. I got to meet some people. I got to meet a lot of good people. But I was stationed in the kitchen. I couldn't even get the job of being the person who went around the table, sweeping up the stuff off the floor. We weren't allowed to do that. I didn't get the job of being the man who went by and crumbed the table. I didn't even know that term until then. My father told me, they said, yeah, there's a guy who crumbs the table. Crumbs the table. I didn't get to do that job either, because now that was being done by folk of another hue. So the only job I had was in the kitchen. Honor student, going to my senior year at Baltimore Polytechnic. I wanted to make money, but this is what they were going to define me as. And I remember the day they asked me to scrape the grease off the floor with a little putty knife. Now I was 16, somebody would say, well, I wasn't thinking, I said just whatever. And I did it. I got down on my hands and knees, and I went around that gigantic kitchen with a putty knife, scraping grease up. And I remember riding home saying, I have no respect on this job. And it doesn't look like I'll ever get any. Nobody even thinks of me as a person. I am so considered just a boy Not boy in the sense of a youngster, but a boy in the sense of African history, African-American history. I said to myself, if they ask me to do this again, that'll be the last day I'll work on this job. I cannot let myself think that this is where I belong. Somebody said, well, you do what you got to do. That's true. But at that stage in my life, what I had to do was come up with a definition of myself. If I had a wife and 3 children, I'd have scraped grease, kept on scraping grease probably. Been mad, whatever, because the price wouldn't have been too high. But at 16, the price was too high. They asked me to scrape grease another time. I scraped the grease. I got down. My father always told me, you do what you're asked to do. I got down on my hands and knees, and I scraped the grease. I came in the next week, and I quit. And the person in charge said, you're quitting. We've given you all these hours, and you're going to quit? I said, you all didn't give me hours. I worked every last one of them. I said, I wanted to make the money, and you needed the job done, and I came in and worked them. But I'm going back to school. And I'm not going to be able to be, well, you can work after school. You can come in on other days. I said, I'm sorry, I can't do that. It was too high a price for me to pay. I was not going to end my senior year with that being my definition of myself. I had seen it happen to too many of my friends in the neighborhood. It wasn't going to be mine. Vashti said, I may be queen, but I am not going to be queen at this cost. That's a part of the story we seldom put in there because it plays into what happens to Esther. I told you Sunday that the king then gets with all the men, and the men say, you got to sign a decree. You got to do something. You got to get rid of her because all the women have been at her event. And if she's allowed to do that, when we get home, they're going to do the same. Now, that's a lesson in itself. That's a lesson in subjugation and oppression all in itself. But I'm not going to tarry there tonight. I want you to think about it on your own, though, that the men said to the king, you better deal with her because the rest of our women going to act the same kind of way. But it was a society where men lorded over women, where women were considered the property of a man. And throughout history, women have been relegated to second-class citizenship. And it's taken their strength of will to have Vashti moments to say this will not continue and to stand their ground and force change. So the king decides to get somebody else. And I told you how he went through elaborate search. And Mordecai, the Jew, brings in Esther or Hadassah and tells her, don't tell anybody where you're from. Don't tell anybody who you are. Because noblemen did not marry outside of nobility. The king would not even be considering somebody outside of nobility. So he says, don't tell them where you're from. Let them guess, wonder, and be concerned. The king had harems. The king, there are later writings that seem to imply that Ahasuerus, that Xerxes I, had harems, was involved with a lot of women. And so this may have played into that time. And so Esther is selected to be the queen. Now remember, Vashti is going from queen to commoner. Esther is going from commoner to queen. Both are stepping into new roles. The difference is Vashti is going into the role that Esther had. Esther is going into the role Vashti had. And she is going to face the same things Vashti faced. And she is going to be forced to make the same kind of decision Vashti was forced to face. She goes from poverty. She is the Horatio Alger of the Persian Empire. She goes from rags to riches. She goes from this little Jewish girl living in her cousin's house who has taken her in and is watching over her like a father after her mother and father dies. And maybe there's a brother or another family member that has also moved in with them. And now she has an opportunity to try out to be the queen. She's in the record because her tryout succeeds. She gets from point A to point B. Part of the reason she gets there is because she finds favor. And this is a point you've got to get. When your life is in God's will, favor comes your way. When your life is in God's will, favor comes your way. But there will come a point when you have to choose between the favor that's on your life and the God of favor who gives it to you. There comes a moment where we all have to choose between the favor on our lives and the God who gives us favor. When there is a choice that has to be made between the will of God on our lives, where he's been leading us all along, and the wonders that have come into our life as a part of being a part of his will. His will brings wonders into our lives. And there comes a point where the wonders become so significant that they begin to challenge our commitment to the will. I'm going to be preaching some more about that in a few weeks. Esther is made the queen. She's so fine when the king sees her, he reaches out his golden scepter and says, she has to be mine. That golden scepter that he reaches out with, the kingly scepter. The scepter is the symbol of authority that he holds in his hand. And he stretches it out to her, and she becomes his queen. Mordecai rejoices. The family rejoices. The Jews in Susa who know her rejoice because one of theirs has made it to the top. Let me y'all miss that. One of theirs has made it to the top. Now, when people are making it to the top, seldom do the folk around them understand the will of God on their lives. They just see the wonders of God breaking forth from their lives. People see the wonder of God on our lives. They see the new job, the new house, the car, the career. They see the good family, the money that came in. They see the new opportunity over here. They see the trip that you took over here. They see the wonders. They do not understand the will. The will of God is planted in our mind, heart, and spirit. The wonders become the vehicles by which we travel to get there. They are what are necessary to get us where we need to be. To get us where we need to be. Jesus in a temple at age 12 confounding the scholars. That's the wonder. But the will of God is that he will introduce the wisdom of God to the entire world and to generations yet unborn, and redeem mankind and bring them back to fellowship. People see the wonders that he opens blinded eyes, he unstops deaf ears, he can walk on water, he can talk to wind, and even make waves lay down. Anybody would want that, but they don't know the will that'll leave him on a cross with nails in his hand and a crown of thorns on his head. All of what he is doing is leading up to where he's going, the fulfillment of the will of God. The wonders are necessary to get him to the place where he fulfills the will of God. But the danger in all of our lives is that the wonders become so great that they rival the will. That they begin to rival the will. And so Vashti is deposed. Esther becomes queen, and she has it all. I mean, Esther is living large. The king says, I give you half of my empire. I mean, he is just enjoying the fact that he is married to the finest woman in the land, that she has everything. Anything she wants, she'll be able to have. That's the way her life is now being moved. This is Esther from the block. Hadassah. There's a Hadassah. You know somebody say, I knew you when you were Hadassah. Now you Esther, Queen Esther. But I knew you when you were Hadassah, when you had on knee-high socks, when you had buck teeth, before you got all that cosmetic work done. I knew you as Hadassah. She's living large. She's living out her dream. She's living everything she could ever want to have. But in the midst of living in your wonders, God calls us to step into new roles. Her first new role is to be queen. She's living at home, living with Mordecai and his family. But her first new role is to be queen. It's to step out of her comfort zone and to take this position of queen, to try for it. Notice, I said it wrong. To take the position of queen. No, to try for it. She has no idea she's going to make it. She has no idea she's going to get it. It's going to take about a year or more just to go through all the preparation. She doesn't know she's going to get the final opinion or the final job. Why should she waste her time doing all of this? Why should she go for this? But she does. Mordecai lays it on her heart. She goes through all the training and she gets it. You don't know in advance what the future holds for you. You hear it in your heart and in your spirit and in your mind. You don't always see it in your reality. You don't see it. And quiet is kept. Some of us have near vision. We only see so far in front of us. We don't see way down the road. We just see a little bit ahead of us. Maybe this can happen. And some of us who have lived through great trial and struggle just see today. We have not been blessed to have the cataract stripped from our eyes or have LASIK surgery so that we can see long distance and see clearly. We can just see what's close up right here, right in front of me. But she goes for it. For some reason, she steps into a new role. And she steps then into the role of queen. Now, with everything going her way, something comes up. Haman, the king's right-hand man, decides to wipe out all Jews because he doesn't like Mordecai. Mordecai refused to bow. I said in it Sunday, you got to watch who you listen to and whose issues you allow to be planted in your mind. This man has an executive job, and he's listening to folk who receive packages saying, you know, so-and-so didn't bow down when you came by. You ought to do something about that. You're not allowed that. Satan knows how to plant insidious little ideas in your mind. So-and-so don't like you. So-and-so been talking about you. So-and-so, been scandalizing your name. You know, they think they better than you. Isn't it amazing? How many times have you heard people talking of, somebody says somebody's talking about you, and the person they're talking about doesn't even know you. You don't even know them. She thinks she arrogant. He think he all that. And you don't even know them. They don't even know you. But somebody's listening to it. Haman is listening to the minimamites. He's listening to folk who have specialized in basements and not cathedrals. And he's letting their thoughts be planted in his mind. He's on the 16th floor listening to folk who are at the door. And he decides to make Mordecai his enemy. There's so many other things in the story that could fit in. But what he plans to do is have all Jews wiped out, and he gets the king to go along with him and has the king declare it, make an edict of it, and once the edict is done, it can't be reversed. It can't be reversed. All Jews are going to be destroyed on a certain day. All throughout the realm, they're going to be destroyed. They're going to be killed. Mordecai gets the word of it, sees it written, and says to Hathach, you got to go to Esther and tell her she's got to step out of her role of the official dignitary queen. She's got to step out of her role of head of Instagram photos. She got to step out of her role as leader of Facebook. She got to step out of her role as chief provocateur on TikTok. And she got to go see the king. And she's got to use her influence to get this edict reversed, or we're in some deep trouble. God calls us to step into new roles. And sometimes when he's calling us to step into a new role, that little voice that we've been hearing in our heart and spirit begins to make sense, begins to start speaking clearly. We begin to understand. She's beginning to understand some stuff. It's not by accident that I'm here. It's not by accident I'm the only African American on this job. It's not by accident that I went to a historically black university and college and university. It's not by accident that I was reared a single child. It's not by accident that my mother and father taught me to believe in certain things. It's not by accident that I like going to church. You begin to start realizing when new doors start opening, or you see the clouds start moving back, you begin to start realizing that maybe, just maybe, the steps of the righteous are ordered by the Lord. It is not by happenstance that I am here. Joseph is thrown into the well by his brothers. The Ishmaelites come by and some brothers sell him off, and Joseph is taken to Egypt. Taken to Egypt and sold to Potiphar. Works in Potiphar's house. Potiphar's wife tries to ease up on him and tries to, in fact, seduce him. And he runs out and leaves his coat. She lies on him to her husband, and her husband is so insecure he believes the lie. He knows how Joseph is. He knows the kind of man he is, but he also knows his wife. And so he works with her lie rather than Joseph's integrity. Joseph is put in jail. Joseph helps a baker and a butler understand dreams. They forget all about him when they get out. Finally, the Pharaoh has a dream that no one can interpret. And the baker remembers that there's somebody in jail named Joseph who can interpret. Joseph comes out, interprets the dream. Pharaoh elevates him to second in command. Joseph ain't listening to gatekeepers talking about who talking about who talking about what. He's just so amazed at where God has put him. But he's there when a famine hits the land, and he's got grain for everybody, and he's there when his family comes to town hungry. And he realizes that maybe, just maybe, all of this has worked because God was ordering his steps to be here when his brothers got here. I believe Esther starts realizing when the word comes to her that the Jews are going to be killed. I'm sure it ran through her mind. I'm a Jew here. I'm a Jew here. But at the same time, she's countered and balanced by the wonders that God has put in her life to get her there. What school did she go to get this job at the law firm? What scholarship did she win to get this big-time job? What people were placed in her space of influence so that she could be introduced to this person over here who could lead her to this career over here, who could introduce her to this man over here, who could let her live in a luxurious part of town. All of these things had moved together so that she could be where she is, but she can't help but look at all she has. She sends word back to Mordecai. She's been invited to step into a new role now. She's been invited to be Moses before Pharaoh. And see, initially, all of us would say, I can't be Moses. I couldn't go in there and tell Pharaoh, let my people go. How many of you could walk into the president and say, let my people go? And not be afraid that the NSA would be following you, the FBI would have a tail on you. There'd be others waiting for you, and you might wind up in jail. My God, we read about how the FBI taped Martin King wherever he was, wherever he went, how they even sent tapes to his wife to try to discredit him. So we know what government can do. My God, Moses walked into Pharaoh and walked out. Walked out. Esther is saying this, I don't know if I'm going to get out of this. I saw what happened to Vashti. And can I lose all of this? Stepping into your new role makes you question, and makes you wonder, am I ready for it? Am I up for it? Do I have what it takes? But the awareness is that God gives us everything we need for any battle he places us in. We just have to remember it. You know, the interesting thing about self-defense is trying to learn your moves well enough that they become, you don't have to second guess yourself. They just become automatic. The problem I always had with foreign language is that I always had to think in English and translate to French. And when I was listening to people, I used to tell people when I was in school studying French that I could read it, I could speak it, but I could not easily converse because I had to interpret in my mind everything someone said. It hadn't become second nature. I didn't have a second language processor in my brain. I had a program, but not a processor. And so I had to think it through, hear somebody, and try to catch what they were saying, and often be lost in the sauce, because I couldn't get it. What God is trying to get us to see is our commitment to him and our relationship with him has to make us feel our resources are second nature. That when we hear it, we'll know it and we'll know how to respond and we'll know what to do. Our fear often is we will not know what to do in the new situation. There's a book out, the subtitle of which is What to Do When You Don't Know What to Do. What to do when you don't know what to do? You do what you know to do. What to do when you don't know to do? You do what you know to do. And what you know to do will get you to where you need to go. You do what you need to do. Esther says, I don't know what to do. And sends word back, I can't do this. Because if I go to the king, he has to hold out his royal scepter to me for me to speak to him. And if he doesn't hold out his royal scepter, I can be killed and everything will be lost. Really, I can be killed and I'll lose all of this and we still won't be any better off. She left out that if I go to the king and he does not reach out his scepter, I can be killed. But what if he does? Esther, the only option you have is not that you're going to be killed. There's another option. He might reach out his scepter to you and you will be saved. You can go and speak. Stepping into your new role means there comes a moment where you recognize that everything that God has done is leading you to this moment, leading you to where he's calling you, leading you to the next step you have to take, leading you to the next chapter. Everything God has done through this pandemic is leading you to this next chapter that God is beginning to unfold in your life. The question is it unfolding for you with opposition and contradictions and concerns? Or is it unfolding to you as an adventure to be taken to see what's next with God? You see, it is only in the impossible that we grow. Now, let me take that back. It is in the impossible that we begin to see our own growth. When God gives us that which looks beyond our capability, we see the next chapter, but we see who he really is. Go tell the king he got to change this edict. Go tell the king he's got to say something. He's got to get rid of this. Mordecai has sent word to Hathach, or rather Hathach has sent word to Esther that this has to happen. And Esther is, I don't know about all this. I don't know if I should do this. In fact, let's come down to verse 9. Hathach went back and reported to Esther what Mordecai had said. Then she instructed the king's official and all the royal and women and whatever to be summoned into the king's court, and that they would be put to death unless the king extends the gold scepter to them and spares their lives. But 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king. The king ain't been looking for me. He ain't been calling for me. He's preoccupied. He's preoccupied. And maybe I should just stay where I am and you need to look somewhere else. But the will of God is in your life. It's vested in you. This next move on the chessboard is not going to be by a rook or a pawn. This is a queen's move. Y'all missed that. This next move on the chessboard can't be done by a rook, a pawn, a knight, or a bishop. This is a queen's move. Only a queen can make this move. Help me, somebody. You're sitting here saying, can't somebody else do it? I just don't see how I can do it. I might be lost in this move. No, you got to see this is your move and figure out how you gonna make it. In 2022, we got to step into our new roles. Roles that have been in preparation for years. These moments in time were set, and God has been preparing us for this moment in time. I do not believe it is by chance or happenstance that I went to the University of Maryland, that I went to Baltimore Polytechnic, that I went to Garrison, that I went to Cherry Hill School 159. I needed to meet the teachers that I met at Cherry Hill School 159. Miss Florine Austin, who's now Miss Florine Camphor, and Mr. Clifton Ball, along with Miss Folks and Miss Fitz and Miss Madison. All of them that I met along the way, leading on up the grades. Miss Coleman, all of them. Those were my elementary school teachers. Miss Graves, Miss Fitz, Miss Hughes, Miss Madison, Miss Coleman, Miss Madison, Miss Austin, Mr. Ball. It wasn't by chance. Those were some of the strongest black people I ever met in my life. They were my teachers, my elementary school teachers, who instilled in me this desire to learn, and who made me sit in the closet if I talked too much in class, who told my mama and daddy at PTA meeting, but who also made sure I learned what I had to learn. So much so that I could go to the accelerated program at the next school, which was an integrated school. I was only 4 blacks in my class, but they told me I could do it. It was hard. There were times I was ready to give up. There were times I thought I didn't have what it took. I couldn't master it. 7th grade was hard. Oh my God, State Senator Barbara Huffman was my teacher in English. She was Miss Huffman in English, and she was rough. God, I can see she was hard. She was rough. I didn't know if I could make it, but I kept hearing Mr. Ball and Miss Austin in my head. You can do this. You can do this. You can handle all of this. Going there was no chance because from there I went to Baltimore Polytechnic, where I learned theory and practice. Oh God, somebody needs to help me shout. Baltimore Polytechnic was grounded in the notion of theory and practice. You learn theory. I remember theorems and corollaries and axioms. Sine, angle, sine. I remember proofs and whatever that we did. I remember studying engineering and engineering labs like foundry, actually making the stuff, and a metal lab making nuts and bolts and sheet metal and mechanical drawing, learning how to do all of these engineering tasks, taking course in civil engineering and surveying outside projects around, learning all of this, not knowing how it would ever play in my ongoingness of my life. But all of these wonders being dropped in a little kid's life from Cherry Hill, living in a row house, 700 square feet, learning all that, then going to the University of Maryland, PWI at that time, predominantly white institution. Going there and learning economics, not knowing where it's going to take me, studying supply and demand and learning business and learning banking, taking courses in accounting, just because I figured I might need to know that somewhere along the line, even though my specialty was going to be mathematical economics, with the derivatives and the integrals and learning how to do long expanded calculations, studying economics, studying growth curves and being a specialist in poverty and discrimination, but definitely learning money and banking and industrial organization. And then realizing God's calling me to preach, saying, well, I guess I'm going to hang up all of that. Why would God have me learn what I've learned and then hang it all up and go to a predominantly black institution, a black college and university, Howard University, and studying to get my master's degree there after dropping out of the PhD program at the PWI in economics. Didn't know what God was doing. Then getting my doctorate at St. Mary's, another PWI. Getting my doctorate there, but didn't understand how all this would play together, that I would pastor in an African-American church in the heart of the hood and use the money and banking skills I learned to help us be able to grow, to buy the church downtown, and then to build the church up at 4501 in this church, learning the industrial organizational skills to learn how to manage an operation. Somebody got to hear me. God putting wonders in your life all along the way, but preparing you to step into a new role at a specific time. And how do you do it? By realizing that growth happens in the impossible. When we bought that building downtown, $215,000, I'd never seen that much money in my life change hands. But that was God saying, I got to show you the impossible, because your next venture is going to be $7.5 million. And you and your team you're going to get some new team members by the time you get to 7.5. Oh, I wish I had some folk in here. I remember some of my team members who were young when we moved downtown. Young, when I say maybe 21, 22, somewhere in that area, young. But they were older when we built 4501. And they had learned their skills in their places. And now they were ready to step up. And then we built this one, which is far more. God saying, I'm showing you that you grow in the impossible. You don't grow in doing what you can do. You grow in accepting the challenge I give you for what you haven't done. Go show yourself to the king. And so what happens, Esther goes to the king, and the king holds out the scepter. And to her amazement, she steps into a new role. She's no longer the fine princess. Now she's the woman who speaks on behalf of her people. And guess what? She's probably wondering, I don't know what I'm going to say. I don't know how I'm going to do it. She's just got to say what she's lived. She's just got to accept that God put her here prepared. And when you accept the fact that God is putting you somewhere prepared, you then have access to all of the things, to the memories that have helped prepare you, to the knowledge that has dropped into you as he's prepared you, and to the open door policy of the Spirit to fill you with whatever you need to know. When Esther finished wining and dining the king and Haman, Haman winds up dead and the Jews wind up free. Now I'm teaching this lesson because in 2022, you have to step into your new chapter. There may be some new assignments coming up in your life. You got to step into them. You got to step to them. And thank God for the people like Mordecai who help keep you focused, who have to remind you sometimes you've come to the kingdom for such a time as this. I came to the kingdom for such a time as this. Oh, God, I need you to write that in the chat, because if it does for you what it did for me, it's going to blow your mind. Write down in the chat, I've come to the kingdom for such a time as this. I was born for right now. I've been developed for where I am right now. You were born for this pandemic. You were born for this experience, to help your grandchildren, to help your children. You've come through everything you've come through so you can be the word of encouragement to somebody else. You've done everything you've done so you can show somebody else what can be done. You're stepping into a new role. You are stepping into a new role because you were born for this season. Oh, well, I got to end there. You know, my time is up. I could teach this for another hour, but I'm limited in time, and I don't want my associate producers to wear me out. I think I'm about 2 or 3 minutes over, but those weren't teaching minutes. I was just talking about what we're doing at church, so I am within my time. Well, we are going to close out on this lesson now. I hope you got it. I hope you got it. God is saying to you, you're going to step into some new roles. It's not always a new job. Maybe it's a new role in somebody's life, a new role in the family. Maybe a loved one died that was the patriarch, and you're stepping into that role. Maybe it's in the way in your family dynamic. You're stepping into a new role. Maybe you're having to care for mom and daddy now. You're stepping into a new role. This ain't the time to talk about why you can't do it. You've come to the kingdom for such a time as this. You were born for this moment. Somebody needs to hear it. You were born for now, so quit making excuses why you can't do it. You were born for it. And God is waiting for you to hurry up and get it done. He's waiting for you to hurry up and get it done so you can move on. You are trapped where you are, but there's a vista waiting for where you're going. We don't know the rest of Esther's story, but this piece of it is enough for us to stop and chew on. It's enough for us to stop and chew on. We don't know if she grew old or what new challenges she took on or what she did for the king. But we know this. When God needed her to change and save the lives of his people, she stepped into that role. And I'm saying to you, my brother, my sister, God needs you to do something in a specific role. And you're discovering it and it's becoming clear to you. Now get it done. Step into the role of the one who gets it done. All right, we're done for the evening. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you for stepping into your role and getting it done. Well, we're going to close out. We're going to lift our offerings. The ushers, come on, let's get ready. Don't forget, Saturday, we have our breakfast for our men. Just go to newpsalmist.churchcenter.com and sign up. And also sign up for Worship Sunday. Remember, we register for worship, so register online for worship on Sunday morning. Meet us right here at the building. Come on over. I'll be preaching the word, choir will be singing, and I tell you, I got a feeling if these last 2 weeks are any indication, God is going to be moving by his spirit, and you don't want to miss it. So let's prepare to give our offerings. Let's prepare to give. You can use Givelify or PushPay. You can use the New Psalmist website to give. You can text your offering to 77977. And you can write in the message line NPBC space $ in the amount. And you can mail your offerings to New Psalmist Baptist Church, 6020 Marion Drive, Baltimore, Maryland, 21215. Thank you so much for your gifts. It means so much in the work we're doing. And be mindful of all of the things we're doing for Black history. Come on, let's bow in prayer and close out. Father, in Jesus' name, thank you for your word. We're stepping into new roles. We're stepping into new assignments. You're calling us to go forward. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for Esther's story. This incident, when she hears that all the Jews are going to be killed, causes her to have to respond. There's a tension between Esther in that moment, because if she acts, she might die. But if she doesn't act, she will die. So, oh God, give us the courage to believe you for how you're setting us up. Give us the courage to trust you for how you're setting us up. And give us the courage to be your witness in the moments you have set up for us. We give you praise now. And these 12 months, we step into some new roles. And we know we can do fully, brilliantly, and completely whatever assignment Jesus gives us, because you will be with us. Thank you, Lord, for Thursday night. And together we say, amen. God bless you, my brothers and sisters. I look forward to seeing you next Thursday. Remember, Tuesday night is prayer call, but enjoy your weekend, and God bless you.